Hey guys, Travis Elliott, yoga instructor, meditation teacher, and author, and I am pumped because this is the first ever episode of the Be Ultimate podcast. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I thought in this first episode of the podcast, we could talk a little bit about my intention, the overview, subjects and topics that we're going to cover, and really what you can expect each week as we connect here on the Be Ultimate podcast. So I was actually a little bit late to the game of podcasts, and it really wasn't until maybe about 2 or 3 years ago that I got into podcasts, and that was through my beautiful wife, Lauren. You know, she was always listening to podcasts and telling me how much she really loved to, learn and to engage within this format. And one day I checked it out and really knew exactly what she was talking about. Now, I live in Los Angeles, and as you probably have heard, the traffic in Los Angeles can be horrid. So, I would turn these podcasts on and I'd be in traffic and I wouldn't even care about the traffic. I didn't even want the traffic to let up because I would be learning stuff and feeling inspired. I was listening to podcasts like the Rich Roll podcast, the Joe Rogan podcast, the Tim Ferriss podcast, Oprah Super Soul Sunday podcast, Jack Kornfield, the Heart Wisdom Hour. And I could have stayed in traffic for hours and hours and hours and not even cared because I was so lit up. I was so inspired. So I'm a big fan of this format. And I haven't really wanted to do a podcast because, I've had so much stuff going on. And, I always thought that a podcast was done interview style because those were the ones that I typically listen to. But over the last couple of years especially, I've heard from many of you guys, many of my students across the world that have done my yoga DVDs or online yoga, that you really appreciate the commentary and the inspiration that you hear in these classes. And so I had this thought, why not create a podcast where each week I can share stories and science and quotes and strategies and techniques and just suggestions to really help you to live your ultimate life. That word ultimate means the best imaginable of its kind. So these podcasts, I think typically are going to be my plan about 20 minutes. And, who knows if they'll end up going longer or a little bit shorter. I'm doing this in one take. I'm not into, overproducing these things. I want to keep it raw and real. And those of you that are watching on YouTube, it's kind of like a hangout, me, you hanging out. Again, if you're listening in your car or maybe working out or getting ready to go to school or work, you put this on and you just hear these words and these ideas that hopefully make your day better and hopefully make your life better. There's a lot of chaos going on in the world. There's a lot of negativity, especially if you flip on the news. But really, for every act of negativity, there's probably thousands and thousands of acts of generosity and positivity. And I'm going to share a quote along those lines towards the end of this episode with you that really resonates for me and that I really want to share with you guys. So you can expect each week, I'll release something, and sometimes I'll release even more because I also want to include meditations within this podcast. So, the word ultimate it really was inspired by my DVD set called The Ultimate Yogi, which really spread all across the world. And at the end of each class, I would tell the students to be ultimate. And this was a phrase that really caught on with all sorts of people, professional athletes, business people, moms, police officers, fighters in MMA, like you name it. That word caught on and kind of became like a slogan, because within all of us, we have this drive or this yearning to really tap into our fullest, deepest potential. And that's what ultimate's all about. And we're not just talking about ultimate like on a superficial level. Like if you really want to be ultimate, it all starts in your mind and in your heart. It starts from within, and then it begins to spread outward. So this isn't some like superficial aesthetic, meaning of ultimate. We're talking about ultimate on all levels and within all dimensions. So, I'm going to tell a little bit about my story, and I'm going to try and keep it brief, but basically my story really has inspired me to help millions of people to also live their ultimate life. And I've struggled, and I haven't been in this place where I am, where, I've really cultivated a lot of success, a lot of victories. I've fulfilled a lot of my greatest goals and desires, like even exceeded that, but I wasn't always like that. And so if you're watching or listening and you're thinking that Travis has always been successful, I'm here to tell you that I haven't always been. And there's probably a lot that we actually have in common, believe it or not. And so, I feel like I have something that I can share that maybe will help people. And if it's helpful and useful and inspirational, then indulge, because I'm going to be here each week. I release DVDs, I release yoga and meditation content all the time for free on YouTube, on my website, traviselliott.com, or through my company, interdimensiontv.com. So I'm going to be here, and you are more than welcome to participate in what you want. And if it doesn't resonate for you, then of course you don't have to listen. Or if you resonate with some of it, but not all of it, take what you want and leave behind what you don't. Like, I'm not here to shove something down your throat that doesn't feel like it's in alignment with where you're at. So just want to put that out there. And, although I am a yoga instructor and a meditation teacher, if you're not a yogi or you're not a meditator, you can still listen, and you can still, I think, benefit from a lot of what I'm going to share with you. And another reason why I wanted to do this podcast was because I wanted to reach people above and beyond just the yogis and the meditators of the world. That this information and these stories that are told are really universal, and they speak to all of our humanity. So each week we're going to explore inspiring techniques. I want you to be able to take away things from each podcast, so that you're not just, getting lip service, and you're not just hearing stuff and it's going through one ear and out the other ear, but you really have these tangible tools, strategies, and techniques that you can incorporate immediately within your life. So we'll cover stories. I'm also into science, and I think we live in very exciting times, because for so long you've had this river of spirituality, and then you've also had this river of science. And these two rivers have not really been flowing together. They've actually been at conflict with each other until now. And now we're starting to see the great river of science and the great river of spirituality beginning to converge and merge together into one. The science is confirming the spirituality, and the spirituality is affirming the science. So it's a very exciting time to be here on planet Earth. So we'll cover science, and we'll cover ancient wisdom, wisdom from the different great traditions, whether that's Buddhism or Christianity or Taoism. We'll draw the best of the best from these ancient cultures and really what is applicable today. So again, I'm not really interested in the theory of this stuff or just talking about this, really, really interested in the practice of it. Confucius said, I see and I forget, I hear and I remember, I do and I understand. So you got to do this stuff. You can't just see it, you can't just hear it, but you got to bring this stuff into action. So hopefully we'll achieve that each week. And again, that's why I want to bring the meditations into the podcast. So in addition to, these episodes where we're talking about certain things, you can also expect, time to time for there to be just meditations included so that you can actually practice this. So, topics that we'll cover, being a yoga teacher, obviously I can't help but talk about yoga, so you can expect inspiration from yoga. You can also expect inspiration from meditation and mindfulness. We'll be talking about personal growth. What are things that you can do to grow within your life, to keep growing and flirting with your edge, testing your growing edge so that you keep flourishing and thriving, not just surviving in life, but I want you to thrive. Again, I want you to live the ultimate life, and I want you to do it with an ultimate body. So naturally we'll be talking about health and sometimes things physical. We'll be talking about an ultimate mind, exploring neuroscience, studies that have happened within the brain, bringing the science into it. And then also an ultimate heart. If you're not able to master your emotions, if you're not able to harness anger and harness sometimes these powerful negative emotions that take us over like a storm, then you're not going to live an ultimate life. So again, this is like a holistic way of looking at personal growth, that you really look at all these different components of who you are. And also spirituality, we mentioned the neuroscience, and the health as well. So these are all topics that I've really dedicated my life to. These are things that fire me up. This is what gets me out of bed at night. This is what keeps me up late at night. Sometimes I'm like thinking about all this exciting stuff and I can't fall asleep because I'm just passionate about these topics. And I want to share what I'm passionate about with you. So a little bit about my journey for those of you that don't know, and even those of you that do know a little bit, this is just kind of a little recap as to, this crazy but really amazing journey that I've been on. I was born in a town outside of Houston, Texas, but soon after about the age of 4, I moved to a small town in North Carolina called Winston-Salem. So if anybody's from Winston-Salem, shout out to you. Hope you're doing well. So I grew up, elementary school, middle school, high school in this town of Winston-Salem. And when I was 9 years old, I was fortunate because my mom introduced me to meditation. So I would take these meditation cassette tapes. I'm that old, yeah. So, back in the day, this would have been like, I don't know, in the mid to late 1980s, we had cassette tapes. So I would take these cassette tapes, I'd stick it in the stereo, And they were these guided meditations. So I would listen to the instructor that was guiding, there was music. And because I was 9 years old, I didn't judge the experience. I didn't filter the experience. Like I went on the journey and the ride that the instructor was leading without any sense of criticism at all. So I had these profound experiences, and this was my first taste into this world that really exists beyond the senses. And we know that the senses are incredibly limited. We know that our eyes can only see so much on the color spectrum. We know that we can only hear so much on the sound spectrum. So all of our senses are limited. And so there's much more than what our senses are reporting to us. And these great ancient wisdom paths, they develop these practices and these techniques to move beyond the senses so that we could access what Albert Einstein called the unified field and what modern day scientists call the quantum field. So that was like a big seed that was planted in me at a young age. But as I got older, I got into other things. I got into normal things like girls and partying and all that stuff. But even in high school, I had this tremendous love for filmmaking. So I worked at the local news station. I worked at a public access station. I worked at the local school board station because I really loved this way of storytelling and creating stories through film. So I would be like in a boring ass chemistry class and the teacher's just rambling on and on and on and on. And, you know, I got my papers out and I'm like, you know, drawing out this film set. I'm going to put a camera here and then put the lights over here and the lights over here. And I'm going to put one camera on a dolly track over here. And I lived very often in this world of imagination. Now, when I went to college, I decided to study acting. And being an actor in college, I went to East Carolina. So any ECU pirates out there, shout out to you as well. I studied acting and it was a way for me to really explore all of what it is to be a human and to do it, you know, in these plays and these films and within these scenes that, you know, it was safe to, you know, sometimes throw stuff and get angry or, you know, to laugh hysterically or to even emote, to sometimes cry. And a lot of these areas of myself I'd really disconnected with. So the acting was really a huge part within me embracing all of my humanity. And so as I went through college, you know, I was studying and I also started landing gigs and commercials, Levi's commercial, a Kohl's commercial. I started doing professional industrials. I started doing, you know, extra work on TV shows like Dawson's Creek and all this stuff. And funny thing, my senior year in college, I actually got a call from George Lucas's casting director who was looking for Anakin Skywalker. And they actually had reached out to my agent at the time to request my demo reel. And I was so excited, you know, here I am in like North Carolina and Hollywood's calling. I, of course, didn't end up getting the part, which I'm very grateful for now because I would never be on this path. But it was exciting at the time. So right after college, I moved from Greenville, North Carolina to a place called Wilmington, North Carolina, because Wilmington was a mecca for a lot of movie and television production. And I got a gig on this movie called Domestic Disturbance with John Travolta, Vince Vaughn, and Steve Buscemi. So I just graduated college and I was hired to be a wardrobe production assistant. But soon after, I was actually promoted to become a teamster. So here I was, fresh out of college, making all this money, getting all these benefits, worked on it for 5 months. And right after that production wrapped, me and 2 buddies of mine moved out to Los Angeles to go pursue our dreams of working in Hollywood. So I moved to LA, and as I was doing the acting thing, I eventually I lost all my money, right? I spent all my money. I was going out all the time, partying, doing drugs, hanging out with girls, and it was not good. I was getting a hole in my soul, and I just wasn't happy, and I was going downhill fast. Fortunately, I had to get a job to pay the bills at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And at the hotel, I was working in the banquets department, and this guy was talking about yoga class. So, I'd never been to yoga. Here I am. I'm probably like 24, 25 years old. This guy's talking about yoga, and I had this crazy stigma as to what yoga is about. And it took him a year to convince me to go to a yoga class. Eventually I did. It was love at first sight. It was the most amazing experience. It was actually the best form of exercise I'd ever experienced, because it was strength and flexibility, balance, stamina, detoxification. And then beyond that, it was also mental and emotional and spiritual. And I felt like at the end of that class that I'd been reconnected back to that kid that I was when I was 9 years old. And it was a bit like a homecoming, like I'd really traveled far away from who Travis is about. I'd lost that connection to my authenticity, but now I was back. And I immediately, after that first yoga class, dropped all things negative and toxic. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I stopped hanging out with people that were negative. And I just started moving down this path of going to yoga and meditating and eating well and taking care of myself as much as I could. Now, 4 months or so after I started practicing yoga, I went on a yoga retreat, and on this yoga retreat, I had a near drowning experience, which I'm going to talk about in a later podcast. I want to just focus solely on that. But basically, I am lucky to still be here. I came very, very close to drowning and dying. And then, if that wasn't intense enough, a year after that, I was in Thailand when that tsunami of 2004 hit, and I witnessed the whole tsunami. So within the span of about 1 year, I had 2 close calls with death. And as you can imagine, this really rocked my world, and this really changed my life around. And this really became the unexpected experience and event from the universe that sent me down this path of teaching yoga and teaching meditation. So I went back to Los Angeles after having been in Thailand, and I started teaching yoga in this little martial arts dojo to 1-2 people. And then over time, my class started to build up. I got regular classes at Santa Monica Power Yoga, owned and run by Brian Kess. And I just kept teaching. Even though I hadn't done a yoga teacher training, I was fired up about yoga. I loved yoga. Yoga was my life. And I was just teaching from that place, sharing it. And I think people could feel that passion and that energy and that commitment to this path. And so classes really, really, really took off. And so I built a following. I started hosting workshops. I started making DVDs, having been a big fan of filmmaking. I brought my love of filmmaking to yoga, and I would hire my buddies to come, and we'd go to a yoga studio and we'd make a DVD, and it wasn't the best DVD in the world, and but people still liked it, and so people started buying these DVDs, and it was helping them out. And then I started to travel. I went to India because I wanted to see, where's all this stuff coming from? And when I went to India, I was shocked to find that I couldn't find one yoga studio there. You know, because in India, the popular forms of yoga isn't physical yoga. It's more of the spiritual yoga and the mental yoga, the Raja yoga or the Bhakti yoga. And, you know, it really reframed the way that I looked at this yoga stuff. And then I started leading retreats. You know, I started, you know, teaching in places like Bali and Costa Rica and Thailand. And, you know, it just took off. And the crazy thing is that it was as if I was being led down this path. When I was on that acting path, I was rising and grinding, and it felt like a grind, and it felt like I was sludging through mud. But as soon as I shifted from that path of acting to that path of being this yogi that I never expected, that I never wanted, it was like the doors were just flying open. And I still had to show up, I still had to take action, but it was as if I was being led down this path. And then that inevitably led to making The Ultimate Yogi, which went on to become one of the best-selling yoga DVD programs of all time. Many of you that are watching or listening, you know, you probably are Ultimate Yogi alumni. In many ways, that has inspired this podcast. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I've always been a musician, so I went and made a chant album where I would take mantras and put it to kind of a rock and roll format called The Meaning of Soul. That ended up debuting at number 3 on the world music charts on iTunes. I started creating books. My first book I co-authored with my lovely wife, Lauren, called Holistic Yoga Flow, The Path of Practice. I recently released my second book called A Journey into Yin Yoga, all about Yin Yoga. We'll dedicate an episode talking more about that Yin Yoga. And then I created a company called Interdimension Media that started producing best-selling programs like Yoga 30 for 30. And we recently launched this Netflix of yoga meditation called Interdimension TV, where you can go and stream yoga meditation classes. And I just released a successful program called Power Yoga Gold, a 90-day program. So, you know, basically, I've traveled down this path where I love what I do. Like, to me, it's not work. To me, I love what I do. And I get to travel all around the world. In addition to the places I mentioned earlier, you know, I get to go to places like Cambodia, Peru, Canada, all over the United States of America, you know, Latin America, Asia, like, you know, traveling all over the world, teaching yoga and teaching meditation and sharing things that bring health and happiness to people. And I get to do it with the ultimate wife. And I have 2 ultimate kids. So I have a family. Like, this life is so rich and so full, and it feels ultimate. So that's kind of why I'm here. And for whatever it's worth, you know, I just want to share. So if it's helpful, I want to share these strategies and these real tools and these inspirational stories and quotes and science so that you too can live your ultimate life, that you too can be absolutely, absolutely ultimate. So again, you know, you take what you want, you leave behind what you don't want. Look at this as an inspiration buffet. And you go to this inspiration buffet and you indulge within as much inspiration as you want. And if there's something in the buffet you don't want, you don't have to take it. It's all good. Now, I also want to say I'm a student. And we sometimes call this Zen beginner's mind, even though I've reached a lot of success financially, spiritually, and family and health-wise. You know, I still feel like I'm a baby on this path. So I'm a student just like you, and I'll always be a student. You know, every day I want to grow because the more that I grow, the more that I can give, and the more that I can share, and the more that I can share, the more that I can give, then the more fulfilled life is. It's not just about money in the bank. It's not just about a nice house and stupid things like, job occupations. And I learned this when I almost died. It's not the stuff that makes us happy. It's okay if you have that, but just know that that's not the be all end all. Now, along the lines of being ultimate, I would like to share a quote with you from Mark Morford, who writes from the San Francisco Guardian. Mark Morford writes, "Stop thinking the global crisis is all there is, and realize that for every ongoing war or religious outrage or environmental devastation, there are 1,000 counterbalancing acts of staggering generosity and humanity and art and beauty happening all over the world right now on a breathtaking scale. From flower box to cathedral, resist the temptation to drown in fatalism, to shake your head and sigh and just throw in the karmic towel. Realize that this is the perfect moment to envision re-enchantment of the world, to change the energy, to step right up and crank up your personal volume. Right when all seems dark and bitter and offensive and acrimonious and conflicted and bilious, there's your opening. Remember mystery. And finally, believe in the seeds you plant. Believe that you are part of a groundswell, a resistance, a seemingly small but actually very, very large impending transformation, the beginning of something important and potent and unstoppable. I hope you guys find that inspirational, because that's what this podcast is all about, man. It is about cranking up your volume. It's about stepping up to the plate. It's about hitting that grand slam, because the world needs you to show up. The world needs you to be ultimate. The world needs you to let go of the things that are bogging you down, to let go of the things you're holding on to let go of your resistance and your obstacles, and to be ultimate in your body, be ultimate in your mind, be ultimate in your life. If you're not ultimate, you're being selfish. You gotta be selfless. So we're gonna get into it each and every week. I hope you're gonna join me next week. I'm stoked. I'm excited to connect with you each week to explore all things ultimate. Now let's finish with the last little closing ritual. May we bring strength where there is weakness. May we bring courage where there is fear. May we bring compassion where there is suffering. And may we bring light where there is darkness. May we be ultimate. All right, you guys, that's it. Episode 1. Already in the bag. Upcoming events I want to share with you guys. I'm going to be in San Luis Obispo, Slow Yoga, February 15th through the 17th. Also excited to be coming back to Toronto Yoga Conference, March 28th through the 31st. I'll be in Columbus, Ohio at Go Yoga USA, April 26th through the 28th. Hallowell, Maine at Panacea Yoga, May 17th through the 19th. This is going to be great. We got a Portugal retreat coming up May 25th through the 31st. We only have a few more spots left. That's almost sold out. That's going to be phenomenal. And lastly, I'll be at the Mammoth Yoga Festival June 13th through the 16th. So please subscribe to the podcast. Please share the video if you're watching on YouTube. Leave me a review. Thank you for listening. Be ultimate.